It's often said that a good leader is a man who isn't worried about his own life, but rather the lives of those around him. People in India say they found a new leader in anti-corruption crusader Anna Hazare. Hazare started his fast unto death on Tuesday, demanding a comprehensive law like the Jan Lokpal bill to tackle the menace. And he isn't alone this time. People from all walks of life, including students and senior citizens, even mounted pressure on the government by showing their support to Anna's march against corruption. Government meanwhile began talks with anti-corruption campaigners led by the Gandhian and agreed to form a joint committee to draft an effective Lokpal bill. However, there was no consensus on who will head it and whether it should be notified. The 71-year-old social activist rejected the government's offer of an informal committee and vowed not to end his protest till the demands were met. Veteran activist Anna Hazare's fast unto death gathered steam on the following days as he pressed for a stronger anti-graft Lokpal bill through greater involvement of the civil society. He has dubbed the protest as the second Satyagraha. Hazare wants equal representation from civil society in drafting the bill. The debate on some of the proposals put forward by both Hazare and the government on the contentious bill that has been lying in the freezer for 43 years has gathered momentum. For more on that, let's connect to Anuradha, who has been following the story very closely.
Thanks, Indra. Well, it's important we understand the basic difference between what the government has proposed and what the social activist has demanded. Government has proposed that Lokpal will have no power to initiate suo motu action or receive complaints of corruption from the public. It would probe only complaints forwarded by the Lok Sabha Speaker or the Rajya Sabha Chairman. Now, it will enable the ruling party to protect its own people. Lokpal will be an advisory body rather. It will just forward its inquiry report to competent authority which will have the final say. Now the question is, if Lokpal made a report against the Prime Minister, will Parliament ever pass a resolution to prosecute him? Also, no police powers will be given to the Lokpal bill. All it probes will tantamount to preliminary inquiries once again. The question everyone is asking, even if its report is accepted, who will file the charge sheet? No mention of the CBI's role at all after the bill is enacted. Well, does that mean that the CBI will lose its powers to investigate the politicians? The government proposal further states that a mild punishment for corruption, which is minimum 6 months and maximum of 7 years. No provision to recover ill-gotten wealth. A corrupt person can come out of jail and use the money. Let's now find what Anna Hazare is demanding. He demands Lokpal will have powers to initiate investigation suo motu in any case and directly entertain complaints from the public. It will not need reference or permission from anyone to initiate the investigation into any case. Hazare also demands that Lokpal will not be an advisory body at least. It will have powers to initiate prosecution against anyone after completion of investigations in a case. It will also have powers to order disciplinary proceedings against any government servant, including politicians, if found guilty. Lokpal will have police powers. It will be able to register FIRs, proceed with criminal investigations, and also launch prosecution. Now, with regard to CBI intervention, Hazare demands the anti-corruption wing of the CBI to be merged with Lokpal so that there is just one independent body to act against graft. As per the Jan Lokpal bill, enhanced punishment, that is minimum 5 years and a maximum of life imprisonment, should be promulgated to the convicts. Loss caused to the government owing to corruption will be recovered from all the accused. Indra, we should also let our viewers know the history of this issue. The first mention of an anti-corruption ombudsman was made in the early 1960s when Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister. But it was in 1966 that a Lokpal was proposed at the centre and Lokayuktas in states. In the year 1968, a Lokpal bill was presented for the first time in the 4th Lok Sabha and the House passed it in 1969. But while it was pending, Lok Sabha was dissolved. The bill was again revived in 1971, 1977, 1985, 1989, 1996, 98 and 2001. But each time it was referred to some committee of parliament and the government has now prepared a rough draft of the bill. The fresh movement for an effective Lokpal began in 2010 after a series of scams. An alternative draft, that is the Jan Lokpal Bill, was prepared by activists India Against Corruption under the guidance of Karnataka Lokayukta Justice Santosh Hegde and senior lawyer Prashant Bhushan.
So what is Anna Hazare really campaigning for? To general masses in India, his courageous display of moral outrage represents a crusade against corruption. This at a time when the ruling UPA government is not only facing the flag for several scams surfacing in the last 1 year, and also its inability to act firmly against the perpetrators. No wonder Hazare's fast has become a potent symbol of protest against dishonesty for angry Indians. But even with the newfound vigor that the civil society is raising its voice, the question that we ask, is the Lok Janpal Bill the answer?
अब खाएंगे नहीं तो काम कैसे होगा?
आप बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं सर।
हाँ तो लाइए।
हाँ तो सर लीजिए।
क्या है?
खाइए खाइए सर, ठाट से खाइए।
A crusade against corruption, a demand for a separate legislation to deal with it. One that has become a clarion call for citizens now raising their voice, both on the streets and on the web. A demand for which 73-year-old Anna Hazare has become the face. The Jan Lokpal Bill, a drastically modified version of the original Lokpal Bill that the Government of India plans to introduce. One that seeks to set up a body to investigate accusations of corruption against individuals and institutions within the government and public servants around the country. However, the irony is, majority of these newfound supporters are probably not even aware of the precise nature of Hazare's demands. The Gandhian is actually calling for a drastically revised version of the government's proposed Lokpal Bill.
हम ये नहीं चाहते कि कल ही लोकपाल बिल लागू होना, इसके लिए समय लगेगा, ये हम जानते हैं। उसका ड्राफ्ट बनाने में करीब 3-4 महीना लगेगा, लेकिन कम से कम आप जॉइंट कमेटी तो कराओ, लेकिन पंतक रहने का कोई मैसेज नहीं।
An alternative version of this bill, dubbed as the Jan Lokpal Bill, has already been drafted by some prominent members of the civil society. These include former Union Law Minister Shanti Bhushan, former IPS officer Kiran Bedi, Justice N. Santosh Hegde, renowned advocate Prashant Bhushan, and former Chief Election Commissioner of India James Lingdo. And what does this alternative bill actually propose? Perhaps the most striking aspect is that it seeks to virtually bypass the involvement of the government in the process of creating the Lokpal body. The selection committee that it envisages would include, among others, all Nobel laureates of Indian origin, the last 2 Magsaysay Prize winners of Indian origin, 2 of the senior most judges of the Supreme Court and High Courts of India, and Bharat Ratna awardees. Interestingly, the administration too would get a representation in the form of the chairpersons of the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, the Chief Election Commissioner and the Controller and Auditor General of the country. Clearly, this version sees no role for the people who have been democratically elected to govern the country. Many thus say that it indirectly sends a wrong message, one that could run deep, that adopting such a system would mean acknowledging the failure of democracy. Critics also say it proposes to install a vigilante body that can act on its own discretion in terms of what and whom to investigate and has police powers to prosecute perceived transgressors. There may be a naive idealism behind the demand and the agitation, but some also fear the consequences of the sweeping power that such a body may enjoy. After all, behind such idealism is the idea that members of the Lokpal will be perfect citizens and with no agenda other than weeding corruption out. Therefore, the apprehension that with no checks and balances, what's the guarantee that such a body won't turn into a motivated witch-hunting mechanism? The wheels of the administration may grind at an frustratingly low pace, but then it also reduces the chance of the kind of arbitrary persecution that India saw during the emergency period. So the question is, are democratically elected institutions no longer effective in running this country? The extreme measures proposed in this people's version are definitely a measure of the unhappiness, frustration and anger within the civil society at what appears to be a tacit complicitness of the government in corruption. Thus, it's evident it's not the process that has failed, but it's people who have failed the process. And it is when the people whom we elect fail to deliver that protests become necessary and corrections are demanded.